We have over 400 people attending, both virtually and today. So really thank you for taking part of this. It kind of speaks to the interest in this. So yes, today we are going to talk about waterfront properties and native fashion, apparently. So riparian, what does riparian mean? I guarantee there's some people in here that have seen Keeping Up Appearances. Anybody heard Keeping Up Appearances and Hyacinth Bouquet and the whole riparian episode? Okay, riparian. So, but what riparian actually has to do with it's relating to or situated along the banks of a river. So we are going to be talking about vegetation along the edge of a river. And why is it important? Well, first, let's kind of really think about it. It's ecologically defined interface, and it is an interface. It is that space between what's going on in the upland and the body of water. So there's stuff going on in between there. And a lot of that is very critical to water health. And that's why we're really kind of interested in it. And again, it's all about vegetation. And so we're going to talk about the importance of having a healthy riparian buffer. And a lot of it boils down to function. Actually, is there any way to turn that? That's all right. So anyway, doesn't matter. So it's no problem. So the main thing is soil conservation. Because what that riparian buffer does is it prevents erosion. The biggest challenge to water quality that we have almost everywhere is erosion. Soil moving off our land and into our streams. And there's a reason that's very problematic. The riparian buffer itself has a healthy riparian buffer is just like any other kind of ecology. There is a structure to it. So you have canopy trees, those are the big trees, and there's a shrub layer, and then you have a subcanopy layer, you have an herbaceous layer. So just like any kind of forest, all those components should be there, and they're kind of critical to the function of the riparian buffer. And the other thing that buffer does is it's providing inputs into that stream. There are all kinds of things living in that stream that riparian buffer is providing them the food, the organic material, the structure, sticks and things provide habitat. So this riparian buffer, if you have this healthy riparian buffer, it is putting stuff into that stream that is vital to the survival of everything living in that stream. One of the most important things is shading. Any trout fishermen in here, trout waters have to be cold. The way to achieve that is to have a healthy overstory because that shades the water. A lot of these microorganisms and fish species that live in there actually need cold water. So having a nice cold stream of which the ecosystem is pumping all this stuff in there will provide a healthy, the one thing we do not really want moving in there is soil and sediment. And that riparian buffer does an amazing job at preventing soil erosion and exactly streams, destroys in-stream habitat. The way it does that is there are all kinds of macroinvertebrates. Macroinvertebrates are insect species that begin their larval stage in the water. Mayflies, caddisflies, there's a whole suite of insects that begin their life in the water. So the eggs are deposited in the water and they begin a couple of their instars tucked in amongst the rocks, doing their thing while they're in there, they're chewing and shredding and eating all this material. They're also providing food for the fish and all the various animals that need to live in there. But they need these spaces. They need the spaces to live. They need these little areas and within the rocks. If you have sediment that comes in, what that sediment does is it fills in those spaces and it removes that habitat for these macroinvertebrates. So we're greatly affecting that sort of primary level that a stream needs. Of course, if you have a lake or a pond, and this sounds sad, but lakes and ponds are doomed. They are doomed naturally. The goal is eventually they're just going to fill in unless we do something about it. And that's their functions. Naturally, erosion is a natural thing. It's not a bad thing. But there is good erosion and bad erosion. There's natural attrition in materials, and that's fine. But sometimes if we overwhelm the system, we put too much erosion because we have removed that vegetative buffer, then the problem is that erosion outbalances the system and our stream or our lake fills in. So that's why it's really important to prevent that soil from eroding. One of the most important things for retention is root structure. Look at the roots. Look at the roots of that tree. That tree is doing an amazing job of keeping all of that soil back. And at least you see, at least the shoreline is sloping. Oftentimes what you'll see is the shorelines are just straight up and down. When you remove the vegetation, you have reduced the ability. This one on this side is interception. And so what interception does is it's stopping. So water's flowing across there. You have managed turf. I consider managed turf just this side of imperviousness to pavement.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, yeah. Y'all didn't eat enough food. The other way to deal with erosion, particularly if you don't have trees and things, is to provide some sort of buffer. And in physics, we call this roughness. So as water is flowing across this lawn, there's nothing to stop it. It's just sheeting across. If you put something up and then that water has to flow through something, then that erosive force that it develops gets broken up and that energy gets dissipated. It can be something as minimal as like a 10-foot buffer. It's an amazing buffer against erosion. So there again, erosion is natural. It's not, just because somebody says erosion does not mean it is a terrible and horrible thing. It's natural. Now, if you're in a stream or a river, there will be channel flow and there will be wave action. The problem is when it's unnatural, when it's unimpeded. And oftentimes, especially on a lake or a body of water, we want to blame wave action. The bulk of the erosion is coming from water flowing off land. Because when water flows, it rolls. So it gains velocity, and then as it falls off the edge, it spins. So if you have if you have a bank and you have just bare soil, when that water falls, it actually tumbles and it's tumbling this way and it's just going to eat. So oftentimes when you see erosion, you'll see where it has eroded the bank. Again, let's provide it with some roughness. So, and the problem with sheet flow, the managed turf, it has been fertilized, it has all this nastiness in it. It is going to carry right into our water bodies, fertilizers, pesticides, sediments. Then you're going to get algal blooms, and then you're going to get eutrophication. Eutrophication is where, again, it's an imbalance. You've provided a nutrient to a system of which it cannot handle it. It can't break that material down fast enough, or if it does break down that material, it's going to take oxygen. It's going to deplete that oxygen for everything living in that body of water, and that's why it's going to stink. And it's going to look ugly and you're going to get algal growth. So it's really important to prevent that erosion from moving into that system. So let's talk about what is a healthy riparian, and it's pretty much what's a healthy forest, what is a healthy anything. It's going to have the structure, and it's been proven that even so this is just birds. If there's any bird fans in here, certain birds live in certain areas. So just even if you don't have a riparian area, if you have a forest, you have a landscape on your property, it's really important to kind of have these elements in there. One of them is the canopy. That's the big trees, the oaks, the hickories, the sycamores. And then we go down to the mid-story. Sometimes you'll hear that called sub-canopy. There's all kinds of different terms. Those are going to be the redbud, and the birches, and the maples, and things live under there. Then you go into the understory. There's going to be shrubs. Get to the ground cover, that can be either herbaceous or ground covers, and there are birds that correspond. There is life that actually corresponds with all this. So again, even if you don't have a riparian area, if you have this kind of structure on your property, it's really vital to kind of have this in terms of have the diversity. And there's this wonderful thing called the diversity hypothesis. I'm in a college, some Christian colleges, and the diversity hypothesis basically says that the greater variety that you have in your landscape, the more resilient it's going to be. So what that means is, let's say I have this one pollinator, and that pollinator for some reason fails. That plant that year just doesn't make it. But if I have other pollinators, if I ever have other species, of which then that species that relied on that one can now access the other ones, then I've taken care of it. I haven't completely removed this one element from my structure. So you really want to have just a lot of different things in yours, just like people. The more different kinds of people we have, the whole better we all get along. So that's really important, having a lot of variety in your landscape. So we did talk about, now we're going to really kind of talk about the riparian part and shade, cooler water temperatures, greater fish diversity. Most of the fish that we have, we're not even talking trout. I'm talking about chubs and minnows and everything else. They need nice, cool water. That's just what the kind of conditions they need to lay their eggs. You have cover, the trees are dropping branches and everything. So the more cover that you're putting in there, then you are able to get bigger fish, because the little fish have a place to hide and they can grow up. You ever seen where they take the Christmas trees and they dump them in the lakes? And you know, there's a reason, because you're given these spaces for these smaller creatures to actually grow up. So again, it's a system of inputs, and it's also putting in leaves and just vegetative material, because there's all these little guys down here. Aren't they lovely? These are some aquatic macroinvertebrates, and they actually have functional groups: shredders, scrapers, and predators. So the shredders are taking those leaves and they're doing exactly that. They're just tearing those leaves into little bits. And then there's another group then that's eating those little bits. And then those little bits are then feeding the fish. This is my favorite one. This is a mayfly. This is a caddisfly. Fascinating creature. Huge group, Hydropsychidae. They actually will make a little house. And you will identify this species by the house they make. Some will take little rocks, and they will glue little rocks together, and they'll live inside of it. Some will take cedar branches, and some will take sticks. And it's species specific. They will create these little homes. Absolutely. There are people that are making jewelry. They're taking these insects and they're putting them into little pools with little bits of gold and turquoise, and they're actually making jewelry out of this. Astounding group. This is a helgamite, vicious thing, amazing fish bait. So providing this habitat for all of these then provides a source of food. First thing, it's taking care of that material. That's why we're not having those algal blooms. These guys are taking care of the material, moving in it, and they're becoming fish for birds and fish and everything else.
So that center one is underwater. It's not a bag. It's
No.
something underwater.
No, there's another group. They will even make little nets. They will create like a little fishing net, and they'll wait for algae flow down, and then they'll go out there and they'll eat the algae. It's an astounding group. These are amazing, amazing creatures. And they're also, there's a group called EPT tags, Ephemeroptera, Plecoptera, Trichoptera, which are indicators of clean water. So we also use these as an index for how clean our waters are. So oftentimes, in terms of when you're doing stream work, you're collecting these species and it's giving you a matrix, or it's giving you an index of how clean the water is. And that's now the reason you won't find them is because they're tucked in amongst the rocks. They need those interstitial spaces. If you're filling in those spaces, they have nowhere to go. And we've created dead streams. And of course, then that affects everything. It affects the fish, affects the birds. So we are here in Northern Virginia. We have something called the Resource Protection Area, RPA. And those Fairfax, Prince William, Arlington, Loudoun did not do that, did not adopt the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. And it's a major tool for counties to address local water quality. We also have big Chesapeake Bay restoration goals. So in the 1990s, the county adopted the RPA as a means, as a first step to kind of help us get toward that goal. And subsequently, we also have stormwater management rules and illicit discharge rules. But this was the first one in the 1990s. The county's like, okay, probably one of the first things we need to do is limit. We know how important this resource protection areas of this riparian buffer is. We need to protect it. So what we did for perennial streams, there's a 100-foot buffer on all perennial streams in Prince William County. we try to limit what goes on. There are certain activities, permitted, exempt activities that are allowed within there. There was development that happened before that. So, and don't drive around the county and go, oh my goodness, and there are RPA. Well, they happened at a certain time. But the main goal is to have this fully vegetated and buffer, and for that to remain undisturbed. Again, it's recognizing that this riparian buffer has quality. And again, it's very simple, it's very basic. It's one of the first things that we can do to intercept sediment, fertilizer, chemicals. And it also, as we've noted, is tree roots does an amazing job of preventing shoreline erosion. It can be a bit tricky though, because a lot of activity happened that destroyed the RPA. And come on in. You want to cover going that, or you want to sit down there? We just let her slip past you.
You're in the, there's another door.
Yeah. So let's say we don't have a nice, healthy resource protection area or riparian buffer. Well, let's restore it. Same goals. We want to retard runoff. We want to prevent erosion. We want to filter non-point solution. There's some challenges. There's some pre-existing conditions. Lack of suitable soil. A lot of that nice, healthy soil that would be easy to grow a tree has now been eroded and washed away. So now we have very poor soils. Higher agricultural use, perfect example. There is a reason, if you've been down to Quantico, there are pictures from the early 1900s of big ships in Dumfries. I mean, it was a major harbor. You can't get a rowboat around in Dumfries or Quantico or any of those streams. And the reason is because back in the day, agriculture used all the topsoil and everything filled in. So that's going to be a challenge in trying to get anything grow. Non-native invasive plants, that's a problem for all of us. And there is an aesthetic. A lot of times we're talking about natural systems. Sometimes people have the sort of Disney garden idea that they want their landscape to work. That can be a little, and it can get expensive very quickly. We have a very robust stream restoration program and a reforestation program. You're a Prince William County resident, you're contributing to that, but it's a lot of money. So it's best to protect it. So what are we trying to do? Trying to restore it. We want to create a native forest community. And what does that mean? Dense vegetative cover, native plants, ground cover, leaf litter. We're trying to sustain a microbial community. And what we want to do is we want that soil to become a sponge. We want that organic material. We want the leaves. We want everything. So when that rainwater comes in, it doesn't flow across it. It sinks in there and it stays in that space. And if you have all those roots, you have those tree roots, you have all this leaf and stuff, then all that water is going to stay in that space as opposed to just flowing right into the stream. So our goal, you're going to restore your RPA or just to verify. We don't even have to have, if you can't achieve 100 foot, which a lot of you, if you have older development, you're not going to have 100 foot RPA. You can still do things on your property to improve the riparian buffer. So what you're going to try to do is develop permeable soil with a high organic content. Intercept that flow, overset that flow. Again, you can't do the 50 foot or the 100 foot. If you can do 10 feet, you're going to help try to prevent that soil from moving into your water. And let's get some diversity in there just for nature, just for a healthy system. So let's talk about some of my favorite trees. And these are some of my favorite trees. It's by no means an exhaustive list of all the riparian trees, and they're not going to be very biased. Love a red maple for foliage. It is really, can't beat a red maple for its for the color that it gives. It's tolerant of periodic flooding and wet soils. Extensive root system. This is why red maples are great to have in riparian buffer. They are not great to plant next to your sidewalk. Or if you want to try to grow something else, because red maples are very good at, their roots are very shallow and they put them everywhere and they're going to beat out everything. But that's a good thing to have if you're trying to keep your soil in place along the shoreline. You have this thing that's just sticking roots out everywhere. They love full sun, ample moisture, so perfect for riparian setting. They're often too sort of an early successional. This is a good one if you are going to restore, that you plant this one kind of early because they're going to be happy to be in there and take advantage of conditions. My favorite, now I live in Clark County. I live right on the Shenandoah River, and one of my favorites is the sycamore. Just for the, I mean, look at that, it's a ghost. I mean, that thing is just beautiful in the wintertime. Nothing beats it for seasonal interest. Loves a riparian habitat. They get huge. This isn't one probably you're growing in your yard, but they do get just massive. You can't really beat them for, and look at that root system. I mean, if you talk, that is holding some, that's holding some shoreline together. So this is just a lovely plant.
Does that need full sun?
It does. Yeah, that one does need full sun. At least to get started. This is a canopy tree. So you can maybe plant it and it's gonna get, it'll grow, but it's gonna take it a while, but it definitely likes sun. This is river birch. Now we're starting to get a little smaller. It's still in the canopy tree because depending on conditions, it can kind of get sort of tall, but I generally find this one to be rather smaller in scale. Seasonal, look at that bark. That seasonal interest is just really kind of interesting. It will actually take flooding. It'll flood it and it'll sit there for a while and be perfectly happy. It's multi-stem. So this is one, if you have this plant, you cut it, and it's gonna go, oh yeah, I'll show you. And it's gonna send up 5 and 10. Oh yeah, I'll show you more. So this is a great one where if you have one of them, whack away, and it's gonna come back with a vengeance. And that's a good thing because every time it does that, it's gonna extend its root system. It's going to have a greater area of impact. And this is a really lovely plant. It's not going to get 50 feet tall. So if you're wanting to kind of keep something sort of manageable, or hey, I want to see the water. Okay, go in there and prune out a couple of branches. Take that one out. Now, so in the RPA, you are allowed to do sightline clearing within reason. But this is one that, oh, we got 2 or 3 liters. I can take that one out and I can have a somewhat view. There's no guarantee that you can have an unobstructed view of the stream, but that's not necessary because this is one plant that will respond to that selective pruning. And again, that root system, that extensive root system, that's suckering and shoot sprouting. American beech is another pretty one. Seasonal interest. It's suited to drier areas. This is one that will take some shade. This one will actually take some shade. It's kind of happy, and it's a wonderful source for wildlife food. My favorite, pawpaw. Now we're starting to get into the subcanopy. This is very much a riparian plant. Happy in the shade. Anybody had a pawpaw? Oh my goodness. Pawpaw. It is the unicorn of forage foods, and I teach foraging. It is the unicorn because it's one of those things everybody's heard of it, nobody's ever tried it. It's like banana custard. It is the only member of the Anacardiaceae. Anacardiaceae is a huge tropical family. It is the only member of that family here in North America.
Well, the bloom looks like banana bloom,
Isn't it weird?
and it also looks like ginger.
Yeah, it's a fascinating. It looks like a bell, and it's got 3 petals, and it's just the weirdest looking. All the taxonomy, all the rosaceae, and all of the flowering plants that we have here. That one's outer space. That one is and it smells weird, and the fruit's delicious. The leaf, and this is a shady. It likes the shade. Look at these huge leaves, and that's an adaptation. It will get these great big leaves because, okay, I'm not going to have a whole bunch, but the ones I'm going to put out there to catch sunlight, I'm going to put up big old leaves on it. And again, likes periodic. Oftentimes, you will find it in areas that are frequently flooded because it does like those inputs. Redbud, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Cercis canadensis, spring color, like the architecture. That's one where they tend to stay, kind of very, and then all of a sudden they do this burst of, and if you plant a whole bunch of them together, you kind of get like this nice open area, and then all of a sudden this mass. I really kind of like them for that. They do like the edges. Oftentimes you'll see them along roadsides. They're kind of happy in that area. They don't really like to compete against things. You want to kind of let them have a sort of their own space. Of course, the bees love them. The sub canopy, you got to have some grain. And there's something about wintertime around here where I really start craving some color. I want to look out in my landscape and see some color. And it does that. It has an amazing, I want to see my neighbor. I want to see green, but I want to see my neighbor. This is a great plant for a hedge or a shrub. Of course, it's putting out berries, not edible. Berries are not edible. Don't even, they're not good for us. But they are both upland. So this is one of the drier species of plants. And they are also very shade tolerant.
But you need a male and a female, right?
You do need male and female, that's right. So if you go to the nursery and you do this plant, you're going to want to kind of make sure that they're provide, if you want any berries. Otherwise, you just get green, doesn't matter, but if you want berries, then you have to have those. Sassafras, another just beautiful plant, just color, shade tolerant, that fall color you can't beat. This is a lovely plant too, because if you plant one, you're gonna end up with 10. It's clonal, it is going to actually spread. It's a great area if you have sort of like a rocky area that you don't want to have to maintain. This is a great plant to put so that it'll spread. You better have sassafras too. So, sorry. It can get or even taller, but generally it tends to stay because it's a shade tolerant. You'll kind of get to the edge and it can get some size to it, maybe 15 to 20 feet. But this is one that generally is, if it's in sort of a woodland setting, will stay fairly small. I like that clonal quality about it because let me buy one plant and let it do its thing is a great plant for me. Mountain laurel, where are my Lake Montclair people? You guys are so lucky because you have this plant, and this is a gorgeous plant. This is absolutely, it's evergreen. It gets these big, spectacular clusters, flowers, it's shade tolerant. It likes upland. It's a little picky in terms of exposure. That exposure means are you north facing or you're south facing? If it likes it, it's gonna take off like crazy. It's also clonal, it will spread like crazy. It can get a little, you can see it can take off, and if you're for that look, but it will also take selective pruning. But this is really a lovely plant. And that's why I always, when I'm at Lake Montclair, I always, on those properties, I always envy them because there's, this is a plant that is just perfectly happy there.
Unless it gets black spot.
It can, but let's remember, but not to the point that it's going to kill it. Well, yeah.
My mind.
Oh, okay, yeah, then sometimes we have to kind of look at then what's going
I think I
on.
know what happened.
Okay. That sometimes oddly enough, the reason people don't like this is because it is evergreen and it will, I can see the water in it. I want to see the water. So, yeah, that's kind of the unfortunate thing about this, where this really lovely plant, but it kind of goes against what people, they want to see their water. So sometimes they don't particularly like it, which is unfortunate, but you can't select it. It tends to like north facing slopes. It doesn't like or dappled. It'll take dappled sun. It is a little picky if it gets too much sun. It gets it will though as you noted with the black spot, more sun would kind of help prevent that. But oftentimes if you get a lot of black spot is because of sort of the leaf litter and what's going on underneath it, because that's then providing a habitat for the black spot spores. Now let's talk about some smaller things. This is buttonbush, Cephalanthus occidentalis. This is a fun one. It really likes wet though. So it is a wetland plant. It is going to be, it's going to want to be in the water. That fruit is science fiction, or that flower is science fiction. I mean, it's just very weird, very Very strange looking, but it definitely is a fun plant. A whole stand of that's really a beautiful thing. It is clonal, so it will spread and be very happy. Great nectar source for bees, and there is two fairly uncommon moths, the titan and the hydrangea stinks moth, that need this plant for their young. But this is wet. You better have a pond or a swamp if you want this particular plant. Okay, now I got a lot of favorites. You can tell I got a lot of favorite plants, and that's all you're going to hear about today, are my favorite ones. The sumacs. And sumacs, you can't beat them for everything. They're an edge species and they like dry conditions. If you have a rocky outcrop or some area that you don't want to mow, you don't want to have to maintain, you don't want to weed eat, plant some sumac and they're going to be very happy and they're going to spread and they're going to fill in those spaces. And then what you're going to end up with is in the spring and the summer, you're going to get this very nice kind of, I think just the architecture of this plant's really beautiful as well. Then you're going to get these flowers. And these flowers are going to get a berry on them. And those berries are packed with vitamin C. So I will take those berries and I'll make lemonade out of them. Sumac lemonade. And I serve that often in my foraging classes. Very light, very refreshing. Before lemons were common, you didn't have citrus, but you needed vitamin C. The lovely thing about this is if you've ever made lemonade, it gets a little concerning when you think about how much sugar you have to make to actually make it palatable. And you suddenly realize, yeah, that's not real healthy. You can do the same thing with sumac and a cup of sugar to actually make it palatable as 4 cups of sugar that you need for lemonade. So this is a very common, fresh, refreshing drink, particularly here in the South. Packed with vitamin C, it was healthy, it was refreshing. You got sick of water. I mean, so you would have sumac lemonade, very simple drink to make. Colony forming, the seeds. So you have this little seed, and it's very interesting. I do foraging classes at the Salamander Resort. We have a huge stand of this, and there are 2 big migratory pulses in this area. One is the end of September, and then there's one around end of October. You have big pulses of migratory birds going through. This will be packed with them because that fruit will still be somewhat fruity, still be real tasty. In the middle of it's going to be the seed. That seed is going to be packed with protein. So it's just this wonderful plant, and it's thousands of them. There'll be thousands of little seeds right there. So it's just a wonderful wildlife plant to have in your property. Help out our migratory birds. Okay. Oh, this is my this is my elderberry is a great one. Cannot beat the dramatic flowers. They get a big panicle. I mean, the flowers can get this huge. They're really very showy. They're very bushy. So if you like that notion of kind of, and I will actually take cuttings. They're also, if you're really wanting to super easy propagation right about now for the next month, find some elderberry bushes, take some cuttings about 1 foot or 2 long, dip them in some rooting powder, stick them in some soil, and they will root. And you'll set it out this year and it'll be about that big. It's a very good possibility that in 2 years it'll be this big. They just spray, they go nuts, and they're a wonderful plant. They're tolerant to all kinds of soils. They like it wet, they kind of like it dry, they don't really care. Everybody loves to eat them, including us. Elderberries are wonderful. The only thing about elderberry though is we have to eat it cooked. The berries are poisonous. So you do have to cook the berries. But I will make elderberry vinegar, I'll make elderberry shrub, I'll make elderberry everything, because it is just really, right now, I think it's all the rage in terms of the homeopathic medicine. Everybody's drinking elderberry. So it's just a wonderful plant for all kinds of different reasons.
Does the soil have to have a regular fertility to it or anything? Cause mine's not doing squat.
Yeah, it could be shade or some other
It's
factor.
more open and it's more sun than.
It might not like a lot of sun. It probably, where most of mine grow, it's somewhat, but not all day. It might,
Well, I don't know.
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
I don't know.
They're like people, unpredictable.
We really are.
So, we're gonna wrap it up then with the herbaceous side of it, and I am not going to go through an exhaustive list of every kind of riparian plant that could possibly be used. The most important thing when we're talking about the herbaceous layer is the function that it's providing. And what we really want is we want that interception and we want that uptake. And here, some of this is not native, there's not native stuff in here. But what we're seeing though is the function. And so you have all this managed turf. And invariably it always slopes down to the water. And the reason it's all green is because somebody, Joe Suburban has one bag, when it comes to fertilizer, one bag works good, two bags works better. That's not how fertilizers work. So actually, let's talk about lawn maintenance first. When do fertilizers show up in the lawn centers? Always. But you go into look springtime. When are you supposed to put down fertilizer? Fall. But Joe Suburban goes out there and he gets his 10 bags because 10 bags sounds about right. And and one bag works good, two bags work better. That's not how fertilizers work. So first thing, I have lawn. It's not a horrible thing. But first thing to do, go to Cooperative Extension Service and get a nutrient management plan. It's a nutrient management plan, Cooperative Extension Service. They'll come out there, they're gonna take a little bit of soil, and for, I think it's like $10, they're gonna create a nutrient management plan for you. And it's going to tell you what and when to put it down. Fertilizer is expensive. Why would you, if one bag works good, why would you put down two bags? So what that plan is going to do is it's going to tell you exactly how much fertilizer to put down. If you want lawn, some of us, you have to have lawn because neighborhood service is going to come at you if you let your yard go. Or your neighbors are going to cast disparaging glances at you or something because you're not buying into the whole, I got to have perfect lawn. What the most important thing is if you're going to have lawn, have it be a healthy lawn. And by healthy lawn, it means that it's not affecting everything around. So here we have the lovely green lawn. If the fertilizing is done right, then there will be no runoff. The cation exchange fertilizer, the soil, there's the cation exchange between the fertilizer. What is down will get used and there will be no runoff. The problem is when it's in excess. So when it's in excess, you want stuff that's going to intercept it. And what that will do is that water is going to flow and it's going to hit that roughness. That energy is going to get dissipated. It's going to get taken up. And also you have created the sponge. There's all these roots and everything that are in there that are uptaking all these fertilizers and everything else that's washing into the water. And you've prevented both the soil that's washing off of there and the fertilizers from entering your water. If you have a nice aquatic complement, some of those really what we call obligate wetland plants, then they're also in there. They're growing in the mud and they're loving that fertilizer. They're taking it up. Everybody disparages cattails. Cattails are doing an amazing job. Cattails are in there taking up all these nutrients. The other thing, and this is so let's go over here. So we're going to talk about the different types of plants. So we have our outland plants, we have shoreland plants. Emergent plants mean they're just at the bottom of the mud. They're kind of like a little bit of wet. They're going to grow up. Then we have floating plants, and then actually submerged plants. And all this has to do with how much water tolerance they can handle. Huge selection of them out there. They're really they're great plants to have in there. So not only are they intercepting stuff coming in, the plants in here are using up those nutrients in the water. I have a koi pond. I don't have to do anything. I have something called lizard tail. I never have algal growth. I never have anything because I have this plant in there. It is uptaking all the nutrients that are coming from the fish and everything else is falling in there. Anybody on the water has geese?
Oh, yeah. Geese and swans, and I like to watch the swans chase the geese.
You want to,
I love-
one of the
So
most,
much racket, they breeding. them?
one of the most basic, well, nobody's eating them.
Yeah, I know.
Florida, so, and I love goose, but I would not eat I call them golf course geese. I would not eat a golf course geese because you don't know what they've been eating. But here's one thing about geese is they're gonna land in the water. They are not, they want to get over there,
I went to the grass.
but they are not going to walk through there.
Yeah.
So it's just a 10-foot buffer. It's a predator thing. They will not leave the water because they don't know who's hiding in there. So that's a very basic, not foolproof. They'll find some little spot, maybe. But that's an amazing lake management tool to have, is just this barrier that they can't see. If they can't see through it, they don't know who's in there and they're not gonna leave the water.
Outside.
Now, the unfortunate thing is they'll just stay in the water and all that nutrient that they're putting on your lawn, they're putting in the water, but you know, welcome to geese.
Would you think that that is, 100-foot, riparian buffer?
No.
Yeah.
No, 100 foot's probably.
Yeah.
Up to here.
Most people don't have enough property to be able to. do it.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, like Montclair, that's exactly.
Well,
the
I'm
problem.
even smaller.
Yeah,
We're Lake of the Woods, which is tiny.
yeah, and that was the problem is, that, now that sort of development would not be allowed.
Oh, I know.
But so that's the challenge, but don't throw the baby out with
Oh, no.
bath water is, if you can get 10 foot. If you can get rid of that 10 foot of lawn and put some things in there that'll intercept water and in time will turn into that sponge. You've done amazing, you've done astounding.
I don't have any grass.
Well, that's good, yeah, that's,
No grass.
yeah, no grass, but anything that you can do, it's that roughness and then that permeability. First, get the roughness in there, get the water and the leaf litter and everything, let it get messy, let the leaves and everything stay in there. Those soils will improve and then you will create both roughness and you'll get that spun and it'll go a long way. And oftentimes, because I have to enforce the RPA and oftentimes I will get to landowners. One time it's in my early young days and when I was all idealistic and I was telling, I was talking to this gentleman and I'm like, oh, we had RPA and helped Chesapeake Bay and the blue crabs. And he looks at me and goes, I hate crab. Okay.
They don't like humans either.
So I'm like, well, the reason to have a healthy RPA and a healthy riparian buffer is it'll stop erosion. You won't lose your land. Because we have a multi-million-dollar stream restoration program. Because of poor land use decisions. So if you value your land, you want to keep your land, have a healthy riparian buffer. So, yeah, but I thought, it kind of caught me off guard there. Oh, save the crab. I'm sure you've seen Plant Nova Natives down here today. You've seen their books. This is their site. They have a specific, they have lists for everything, absolutely everything. This is a particular one for riparian buffers. I highly recommend it. You've seen my favorites, but take a look at it, kind of understand your growing conditions, but it's a great resource.
Yes, so in terms of, like, I work at the Fairfax campus.
Mhm.
And we've got this huge project going on right now, they're revitalizing all the streams, there's a whole other half that's gonna take 15 years to do, so that's falling maybe to student projects. What are some examples of like herbaceous things or grasses that are really good for like chemical and pollution mitigation? So if only got like maybe 50 yards between the road and the stream,
Okay.
what can I put that's way close to the road that's gonna maybe absorb some of that oil and get taken off site?
Sure. So we have another amazing resource, thank goodness they exist, and they have is Ernst Seeds, ERNST, Ernst Seeds, one of the best seed suppliers. And they also have advisors that work there that know our area. They actually know Northern Virginia. ERNST, Ernst Seeds. They have seed mixes for every single thing you can possibly do. One of the things that, so our classic erosion and sediment control mix is often ryegrass and then fescue. Fescue is invasive. It is not a native plant. Your lawn is fescue. It's either fescue or bluegrass. The reason is because it does what it does what we want, but there are native seeds out there that will serve the exact same function for erosion and sediment control. It's not gonna be, we're not gonna get a lawn out of the native grass, but that's okay, because we want to get away from.
I just moved to Lake Jackson, during my 4th year there, and I had waterfront property when I moved there. And now it's silting in terribly. And it turned out it just was approved for our dam to be turned into a spillway.
Mhm.
Do you have any idea what will be the repercussions of that?
And so that's being done by my group.
Thank you very much.
So what we're hoping is it will actually improve it, because what happens with the dam is, what would be nice for the spillway is that the flow be constant. What happens with most is like that, the water stops, the sediment settles out. Flood comes across, water spills over. What would be nice about what we're hoping with that spillway is that it will be this steady flow. Because what we have to do is we have to spend money on the spillway, so every time the flood gets up, we have to send somebody out there. And the problem is the lake. What's your,
Go ahead.
no, you're curious, I'm just curious what your take is.
I'm watching the way the water flows
Mhm.
and how much, we don't get any rain. It just gets lower and lower
Oh, yeah?
and it's filling up the leaves.
Well,
And all
But-
those little places you talked
Yeah.
about at the water's edge, I don't get in.
of course not, because you're in a lake, so remember I said lakes
It's also a river.
and ponds are doomed.
Yeah.
It's a river though.
It is, it's a dam requirement.
Well, but it's a Lake Jackson. We have turned, what we have done, just like Lake Montclair. Lake Montclair is actually a stormwater facility. The goal of that is sediment is going to come into that system. It's going to settle out. That is the nature of lakes. And that's why we have to dredge them. That is just the nature of having this, because that's exactly what happened. You have stopped the flow of water and all that material that would be moving through, and a river would be moved through. But when it comes to a lake, that water has stopped, that material settles out and fills.
Yeah.
Can we take it on one?
There's one online.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, when you talked about the act, the riparian,
Chesapeake Bay Preservation
yeah,
Act.
the Resource Preservation Act. You talked, I live in Orange County. And is that something Orange County should also be signing on? Because we have the Rapidan, the Rapidan runs through Orange County. and-
Counties had the option to, basically Northern Virginia had to. We're right on the Potomac, if you're touching the Potomac, you didn't really have a reason. Loudoun County had the option to be or to not be. They did not. City of Manassas and Manassas Park are not in it because of clerical error. So seriously, they did not write, their name did not get, so, but there are other localities now who are starting Stafford County. There are certain counties that are starting to kind of go, maybe we should. But they're probably, I wasn't here in the 90s, but I can't imagine there was probably a more controversial.
So the reason I'm asking is, could that be used as a tool by a county to manage residential and commercial development?
Absolutely,
So that's why I wanted,
Absolutely.
right?
absolutely. That's what the county did. That's
Okay, so
exactly
what
it.
we want.
But can you imagine the implications? So yeah, you would not have the Lake Jackson, you would not have the Lake Montclairs.
Well, we have a development.
Because you would,
Next to the Rapidan. we do want
yeah,
to-
no, that would not happen. That would suddenly, and it was seen as one of the biggest land grabs. In the 90s, that was seen as a huge land grab. You were taking our property, you were condemning our property. It's a couple years ago, I was invited by the Secretary of Natural Resources to sit on a committee about localities wanting to adopt the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. I was glad that I was in the middle of it, not in the beginning of it, because it can be, it seems land grab.
I think Fairfax County Water Authority, it's called Fairfax Water again, has a program where you can apply for a grant to replant like shoreline,
Mhm, yeah.
riparian hunter.
Yeah.
Does Prince William County have anything like that?
We do not. I wish we did. And actually, so I work closely with Nikki Belize and with Fairfax Water. And so I will actually point our residents to their granting. Now, what we are going to do, and for us, I mean, I'm a little, so here's my thoughts. If you can afford, lakefront property. Or you can,
Depends on how long ago you got it.
yeah, you can, you can do, or simple things, actually, but what we're trying to do now is we're actually doing a rural reforestation program. So for us, a lot of, I mean, really along the lakes and stuff, the RPA in this county is not too bad. The issues that we actually have are in the agricultural areas because they have no RPA. Right. So what we're actually doing is we're seeking funding to go into the rural areas and restore the RPA. Because with the residential, we have rules and, it's a little easier our biggest paucity of healthy RPA is in our rural areas where just farming activity, they have a riparian buffer like this wide. So in the calculus that we've done, we've decided that's probably the better place.
But then there's committees in the delegation in our legislature that are trying to take agricultural lands out of those areas, so.
Yeah,
Against
they're
brick
the
wall.
most powerful lobby in Virginia, is the ag lobby.
Nothing stays the same.
And, we have, and there are programs, there's DCAP programs, and there's lots of things there for the ag, for the farmers. And, but just in terms of how we want to spend the taxpayer dollar in terms of the funding of the grant that we can provide, we're trying to do the rural reforestation program.
So if I may ask another question, Fairfax Water, has this 100-foot buffer on it. How much attention do they put to like going along the river and see what people are taking out, like clear cutting their
Nikki
trees?
Belize does a yearly, they do a yearly survey. They do both sides. They do their side, they do our side, because they have an easement on Prince William County.
Right.
Varies from 15 feet to however many feet. And so they actually regulate in terms of, so we have the RPA, and then they also have the easement. So they're able then to regulate docks and all kinds of structures. If you put any structure in it, then you go through them, but they do a yearly survey of that.
Oh, you like that would be up to the Lake Jackson Dam or something? That's
Yeah,
right.
everything within what they consider the reservoir.
And I live directly on Quantico,
Mhm.
and I'm wondering how if it is being monitored, because I'm thinking maybe it's not being.
Quantico, probably not, because again, you can't get a rowboat around in there.
Yes, you can.
Well,
23-foot boat.
yeah, so then that's one where I can only be so many places.
I know.
I can only be so many places, so
Omnipresent.
if you see,
But we have a,
yeah.
don't we have a Chesapeake Bay board that's supposed to have permits?
No, the only thing that the Chesapeake Bay Area Review Board, the only power that they have is to, there are permitted exempt uses, and administrative exception uses. The only authority they have is any encroachment into the seaward portion of the RPA.
Okay,
So, but that's an approved development. If it's RPA violation, that comes directly to me. So if you see RPA violations, call me up, let me know.
All right.
What's that? I hope so. I mean, seriously, because I can't be everywhere, I can't be everywhere. And Tom works for Tom supervisor.
that's it.
Yes, so, I'll send Tom out. Cat amongst the pigeons. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to self-plug, shameless self-plug real quick. I'm with the Virginia Department of Forestry, I'm Lindsay. I am currently your forester, but not for long. We have filled a role for Prince William. But we do offer planting plans. That's something that we do. There is somebody who does specific riparian and planting plans. He's Jacob Zelensky. He's our Bay Watershed specialist. He works all throughout the district, covering from Orange all the way up to Northern Virginia. So if you're interested in that, he does a site visit and he'll write a plan. and that's it, it's all free, it's just our services to.
Thank you for that's a wonderful resource. And there's also cooperative extension service. There's all, we also, so the Department of Forestry, we work closely with them and also cooperative extension service. They're being going out to Lake Montclair quite a bit and helping because it's the same thing. Montclair is, they got 10-foot RPA. But there's, you know, there are things that you can do and there are resources here in the county that can help you with the plan, with funding, with all of that to, you know, yeah, you might not be able to get 100 foot, but every little bit that you can do is going to help. And that's kind of where we are with this county. If we were no development and it was just RPA everywhere, but that's not the reality. We have in Quantico, we have houses right to the edge of the water. We have people that demand, I want to see the water. I want to access the water. This is my right. This is my right. And you know, so how we doing? You can get it.
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
Sorry, I was in here for last one. I just live on Lake Anna, and I was wondering if you had any info on that. We've had harmful algae blooms every summer.
Lake Anna is having a reckoning. Lake Anna is having a reckoning where they are starting to look at the localities that have RPAs and buffer requirements because, yeah, it's.
Funding, is there funding going into it? Is there that or?
My first, Lake Anna, that's what county is.
Spotty, orange.
Yeah, check in there or also checking for soil and water. Though soil and water is often limited to agricultural.
So agriculture.
Yeah, thank you.
Very nice.
Third June, you said lake, third June, is there a typical lifespan in the lake?
Or you manage it, you dredge it, or you manage the erosion, you manage the sediment inputs upstream of it. You know, it is so much of this part of Virginia. We've been here for 400 years. There is so much legacy of just problems. Quantico. You could get sailboats in Quantico. There were big ships in Quantico, and there's just so much of a legacy that we're trying to deal with. So all we can do is moving forward. And same with the Lake Anna, they're having a reckoning.
I know this is the last question, but it's a follow on. You know, the situation in Lake Anna, we're article 50 pictures, and a big concern we have is Lake Montclair. We don't want it to become another Lake Anna. And part of it is global warming. You know, if things get warmer and warmer and warmer, the algae becomes further north. We see phosphorus causing algae, toxic algae in the water, and that sort of thing. So my question to you, sir, is what are your suggestions about what we can do in our lakes to keep them from becoming Lake Annas?
Well, if upstream of it, if you have control of development upstream of it, then that's a big help. Because it gives you, because we have stronger erosion and sediment control laws. If you have a bunch of ag up above you, that's problematic. In terms of inputs, go get that, you know, there's now a phosphorus. They've taken out phosphorus in terms of those fertilizers. Get that soil get that nutrient management plan. If there are common areas, why are we mowing this? I go to so many of these localities and they have this just common areas that they're spending HOA money. Why are you mowing this? And especially on a lake.
Yeah.
Why are you mowing this? Why are you putting fertilizer down? Restore it, let it. And you won't, so much Lake Montclair, yeah, you're not gonna get 100 foot, but you know, just these steps, these initial steps, they're going to pay off.